I know it's a cool thing to say that the real estate bubble is getting ready to pop, the housing market's gonna crash, and we're getting ready to go downhill just like we did in '08. I see thumbnails like that everywhere. However, that's simply not the case. In this video, I'm going to simply explain to you and show you why the real estate market simply cannot crash. Real estate markets crash when people cannot afford to buy houses that are on the market. Let's get that out of the way. I don't think anybody would dispute that. That's when prices start to fall and the market crashes, when there are houses out there for sale that people can't buy, won't buy because they can't afford them. So let's let that be our level playing field. Now let's go through some things that people are talking about, some false claims that people are making, and I'm going to debunk those myths, why the market's gonna crash, and then I'm gonna explain at the end of this video what it would take for the market to crash. Here are the 3 reasons most people are saying the market's gonna crash. All right, before we get into those 3, make sure to hit that like button. I would appreciate it if you like learning new things, hit that like button. The first is inflation. Inflation is obviously out there right now. People can see it. It's tangible. It's a hot topic. In fact, inflation is the highest it's been in the last 40 years. So let's do a little bit further thinking. Let's put on our thinking cap and look at that a little bit objectively. All right, it's the highest it's been in 40 years. So let's go back 40 years. 1982 is 40 years ago. In 1982, inflation was just as high as it is right now. And I happened to go back and do some research on the real estate market and housing prices in 1982, 1983, 1984. And guess what? After that all-time high in inflation, the housing market did not crash. So just because inflation and just because things are rapidly going up in price and in value and things are costing more to buy, that does not necessarily mean a real estate market crash. Inflation is not a new thing. It's gone up and down and gone all over the place, usually up over the past 100 years or so. And just because there's high inflation does not mean a crash. The second reason people are saying the housing market is going to crash is because interest rates are going to start to creep up. When I was doing my research about inflation, I went back to 1982, and did you know that in 1982, inflation was just as high as it is today, and the interest rates on mortgages was 17%. Yes, 17%. So in 1982, we had 17% interest rates, and we had crazy high inflation, and we still did not get a real estate market crash in 1983, 84, 85, till 2008, honestly, was the next actual crash. Historically, interest rates on mortgages have been between 5 and 10%. The fact that we're talking about maybe getting between 4 and 5% at the end of this year and into next year does not mean a crash. Goodness gracious, it was 17% in 1982. I'll get to this here in a little bit, but increasing interest rates could potentially slow the market down a little bit and maybe scare away a few potential buyers. Not enough to affect anything, but it could have a slight effect on the market, but it's not gonna crash it. The third reason why people are saying the housing market is gonna crash is because houses are just too expensive. The thing about real estate and the thing about houses is they go up in value over time because of appreciation, inflation, and a ton of different factors. Even when inflation is at its normal terms, real estate and other things go up in price. Milk, houses, clothes, cars, everything gets more expensive over time. So technically, every single year, things should be more expensive. So the fact that houses are at an all-time high should be normal. In 5 years, they should be an all-time high. Next year, they should be an all-time high. That's kind of how prices going up and inflation works. Just because houses are expensive and going up in price does not mean a crash. That's what should be happening. But this is where I do want to put a little bit of a asterisk in and go a little bit further into this house pricing topic, because that's where potentially things could get a little bit slippery and things could kind of start to shift. Let's try to keep this as simple as possible because I'm always not the best at explaining things. I want to keep it simple so you can understand where my mind is on this topic. Let's say that there's 100 houses in the US. 100 houses, keep the math simple. Every single house recently has gone up in value a ton. On the surface, that's not a bad thing. If all the houses went up a ton in value and they all got listed on the market, that might be kind of scary because not everybody can afford them. But that's not what's happening, or that's not what's gonna happen. Of those 100 households, not everybody can afford to pay the new prices, but not everybody is listing their house. Realistically, let's say 20 people of those 100 households can afford to buy a new house at the new prices. If there's 100 houses that have gone way up in value and 5 of them get listed this year, which is probably pretty comparative to the national average, if not less. 20 people looking to buy a house, 5 people listing houses. Even if those 5 houses are a little bit more expensive, there's still 20 different people looking. So some of those people are going to be able to afford the new prices. Kind of what it all boils down to is all these houses are super expensive, but very few people are actually selling them. There are so few people listing their house for sale. There's always, and there is, people that can afford to pay them cash, or people that can afford to pay the higher prices because they have a bank that will work with them, or they're pre-approved for a certain amount. There is just way too little supply out there to meet the demand. If all the houses got listed, then of course not everybody's going to be able to afford them, but that's not the case. So basically it all boils down to supply and demand, and supply is just too low. There are a ton of factors that can help slow down the housing market, like days on market, inflation's a factor, interest rates a factor, new building permits is a factor, people moving around from city to city is a factor, and all of these things play a part, and they probably will play a part. That's why the housing market's not going to keep doing this for the next 20 years. Things will affect it and slow it down a little bit, but they're not going to make it completely plummet. Crashes are not cyclical. If you look back during the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the housing market really got hit. Until 2008, almost 80 years later, that was the next real crash. The housing market is just too big to pop all of a sudden. I know it's really cool and awesome and sexy to make thumbnails that display the housing market crash. I just don't see it happening. All those other factors play a part, but the main character is supply and supply and demand is rocking. There could be a softening, and there will be a softening, in my opinion, over the next few years, but it's going to be just that, a softening or a plateauing. Rather than 15 to 20% increase in house prices, it's gonna go to 3% increase in house prices, or 5%, or it's gonna be flat. Or it might even dip 2 or 3%, but a 2 or 3% dip over a year, which would be crazy, is not a crash. That's what I try and do in these videos, is try to educate you and give you my opinion from my experience on what's happening and what's gonna happen. If you appreciated that, please give this video a like. If you have not yet, hit the subscribe button and check out this video above where I talk about how to buy rental houses at a deep discount without using any of your own money. See you on the next one. I gotta go put in my office. See you, buddy. Now the door's locked.